When Peter Magyar swept into power, he did so on the back of a massive, cathartic mandate. The scale of the victory signaled a unified desire for a clean break from the past. But voters didn't choose a new direction through abstract policy comparisons. They reached a point where the predictability of Viktor Orban's regime finally felt like a certain loss. The status quo had become more frightening than the unknown. This visualization illustrates uncertainty collapse. Under pressure, humans compress complex anxieties, like global inflation or institutional decay, into a single target of blame. This makes a drastic political switch feel safe, because the cause of the problem has been simplified to a single person. Engineering this collapse is a powerful campaign strategy, but it leaves a legacy of oversimplified expectations. Winning a landslide on these terms creates a psychological environment where voters expect the future to be as simple as the choice they just made. This network shows the transition. Magyar removed the visible node of power, but the vast, invisible web of political incentives and institutions remains intact. Judicial networks, patronage systems, and economic realities don't dissolve overnight. They persist regardless of who sits at the top. This creates an immediate gap. The public expects a total system transformation, while the new leader actually has only person-level control over a massive, resistant machine. This distance, between the high-speed demands of the voters and the slow physics of government institutions, is where the new administration begins to strain under its own weight. The first 90 days are defined by momentum and intense public unity. A collective sense of relief masks any underlying structural issues. The administration prioritizes highly visible, symbolic actions. They fire high-profile figures from the old guard and shift media narratives to reinforce the idea that the country has been fixed. But while political victories happen in the capital, everyday economic life for most citizens continues unchanged. The quiet, persistent stressors of the previous era remain. These early symbolic wins provide a temporary sense of progress, but they also start a timer. Eventually, voters will look past the symbols and demand tangible, systemic results. By the 3 to 9 month mark, the administration is squeezed by three conflicting forces: domestic demands for speed, institutional resistance, and external rules. To deliver on economic promises, the government needs to unlock frozen European capital. That money is tied to rigid conditions. Brussels requires complex, long-term judicial and legal reforms, which cannot be delivered with the speed the public expects. Meeting these external demands forces the government to operate bureaucratically. This deliberate pace directly clashes with a domestic base that was promised a rapid transformation. The irony of the situation becomes clear. Aligning with Europe to fix the internal economy risks a domestic backlash, as voters begin to feel they have merely traded one form of external influence for another. Between 9 and 18 months, the delay in economic relief triggers a fracture in public perception. The voter notices that while the villain of the previous story is gone and the political direction has changed, their personal financial reality remains stressful. Headlines focus on compliance with Brussels, making the government's external work highly visible, while domestic internal improvements remain largely invisible to the average person. Even if the government is achieving real incremental progress, the public's expectation of an immediate reset makes that progress feel like a failure. The initial electoral unity disappears. A fractured population begins to look for new reasons to explain why their lives haven't improved. At this stage, the timeline splits. In one scenario, the public accepts that systemic reform is slow. In the other, more common scenario, a backlash forms. This creates a cycle where the same centralized blame that removed the previous regime is redirected onto the new leader. One signal of this shift is a change in public language. The conversation moves away from the victory of we and toward questioning why he hasn't fixed the problems yet. A second signal is when everyday economic grievances begin to morph back into highly polarized cultural identity arguments. The same psychological compression used to win the campaign is what makes governing nearly impossible. The demand for simple solutions eventually turns against the person who promised to provide them. Hungary is now a test case for a difficult truth. Human beings can vote out a leader in a single day, but the underlying system is not moved by a ballot.